Um, goal setting and strategic planning. I put together a little presentation here, and we are going to review some planning documents, specifically our most current master plan, and specifically in the goals and the capital strategy section. And then talk a little bit about our current situation, and then get into some of the election cycle timelines of when we could move forward with something kind of bigger picture, and then talk a little bit about strategy and discuss that. Goal setting, strategic planning. Before I get into our plan, I thought I'd look way back to an older plan and just talk to you a little bit about land use planning, or specifically land architecture. So the Olmsted brothers, there was a man named Frederick Law Olmsted who was the original designer of Central Park. And he is known as the grandfather of landscape architecture in the United States. And everyone studies him, and it's just incredible stuff. He had two sons, Charles Olmsted and Frederick Olmsted Jr., and they started a company, the Olmsted Brothers Landscape Architects. And in 1903, they came out west and they did the city of Spokane, the city of Seattle, the University of Washington campus. And on that same trip, they spent 3 weeks in Portland and wrote up a memo, the report to the Parks Board. And I will send you guys a link to it. It's pretty amazing. It's about 60 pages to read this, this thing and to see what they were talking about then, and then see what we're talking about now. Is just absolutely fascinating. But as I was looking over their points, they start off with a bunch of points there on landscape architecture and their strategic planning. I highlighted a couple of them because they seem so apt with what we are talking about. And that's number 11. Parkways should be acquired betimes. It's particularly urgent that cities having beautiful local scenery adapted for parks and parkways should secure the land betimes, lest these natural advantages be destroyed or irreparably injured by the owners. And then land for park systems should be paid for in long-term loans. In the case of money borrowed for acquisition of parkland, it should be borne in mind that the land is an asset that will be worth more in almost every instance by the time the loan becomes payable than the amount of the loan. And I think what they're trying to say here is get the land while you can, because it's not going to get any cheaper, and it could be going away. And I wish that Hood River would have gotten a copy of this memo in 1903 as well, because here we are in 2021, and we're still trying to play catch up and get pieces of property and trail easements and all of these different connections and things that they thought of back in 1903 in Portland. Let's see. So, sorry, my screen share is a little off here. So I looked up the goals in the executive summary area of the master plan, and I just thought I'd go over some of the instead of the 20-some pages of goals, just kind of the high-level ones in the executive summary. And so these were separated into 5 different sections. Parks, just what we were just talking about, park acquisitions, acquiring additional parkland necessary to serve the area. Focusing on neighborhood and community parks, improving park sites to provide a diverse range of active and passive recreation experiences. And then riverfront parks, focusing on the waterfront and such, and then county regional parks, providing opportunities for residents and visitors to experience day or overnight basis. The county had asked that we put that goal in. Other ones around focuses on open and natural spaces, open space and natural area restoration, recreation programming, aquatic facilities, provide opportunities for aquatic recreation, through the area's pools and riverfronts. Indoor recreation facilities, one that we haven't focused on much, but definitely something that we've been talking about with community centers connected to aquatics. Specialized facilities, sport fields and court facilities. And then looking at trails, urban and regional trails, primitive trails, trail acquisition, and then the administration side of it, which is the planning and the asset management, maintaining partnerships, and funding the resources and community involvement. I went back and looked at the master plan, and I don't expect you to read all this on your small screen, but if you remember right, when we had put together a capital improvement plan with the master plan to look at all of these different areas that we need to be investing in. And I wanted to bring this slide up just to talk about all the work that we did in the master plan that was just adopted this last fall by the city and the county and the port and us. It's time to start following the book and pulling the book out and kind of following the playbook and what we have already decided on doing. And so there is a list of areas that we really should start investing in and looking toward. But then the question is how do we do that, and what steps can we take now to do that? So I like to bring this slide up at least once a year just to remind everybody where we're at. When you look at the rest of the parks districts around the state, we are in a tough spot at 34 cents per thousand assessed, and very far behind. Now remember, this is our operation dollars. It's not our dollars for acquisition and construction, but whatever we acquire and build, we do have to maintain. So we do need to address this. We did discuss a little bit at the last meeting that we have a pretty healthy SDC. It does not fully fund what we needed to do, but it's coming in at a pretty good clip now. We've been increasing it. And we do have the ability to bond against that capacity or to borrow against that capacity. So when you think about it, we could get around between 1.5 and 4 or 5 million, depending on the terms of the loan, if we wanted to borrow against the $140,000, $150,000 or so we bring in per year on the inside the UGB assets of that. Options for raising revenue. We've talked about this before as well. Local option levy. These are all if we go out to the voters and ask for money. So we could do a local option levy that would create a funding, but it has to be imposed every 5 years in order to do this. So it's not sustainable. That's one of the problems with the local option levy is every 5 years you go back to the voters and you ask them for this money again. And if they say no, and you are using this to make up everything that you need to run the park system, then you are shutting down parks and laying off employees, and you're in the situation kind of like the county was a couple of years ago, where they closed 3 parks, and so it's a tough spot to be in. General obligation bond, that is going out and asking for a bond to invest in a facility. That is if we needed to purchase new parkland or rebuild the pool, we could go ahead and do that, but again, that's just capital money. It does not give us any more operation dollars. And like we had mentioned, if we build new capital, we're going to have to eventually maintain it, especially if we're talking about building actual parks. Now we could go out and buy land that we don't have to put much maintenance on, but once we start developing parks, we need more than just the general obligation bond. And then the reforming the districts, and that's what we have talked about before, where we dissolve and reform the district, and that just sets us up with a higher tax rate. and then we can bond against that tax rate as well. So we had decided to do this last spring, right before the pandemic hit really hard, and then we decided to pump the brakes on that plan and pull it off the November ballot. But those are really our three options for raising our operation dollars and being able to be a more sustainable park system. There's other things that can chip away at it, things like a foundation. Usually those don't pay much in operation, but there are some, creating some sort of parks foundation to help supplement this stuff. Grants are usually, again, just specifically for the building of new assets, but not for ongoing operations. So it's really the ongoing operations that we need to work on. So I looked at elections in Hood River County and thought I'd put a couple slides together just to kind of let you know how the timing of them and when they come out. There are usually 1 or 2 elections per year on the first Tuesday in May, the third Tuesday in May or the first Tuesday in November. The odd years may not have an election. So like this year being 2021, I checked with the county and they don't have anything scheduled to go this year. So we probably won't have an election this coming November. The even years are usually a very big one in November because that is when federal things come out every 4 years, of course, the presidential election, and then there are representatives and both on the state and federal side, and also city council goes in those even years. The election timelines, the deadline for the ballot information to get out for a funding measure, if it's a bond or a levy, it's pretty easy. It's just 60 days notice. So mid-March for a May election or early September for a November election. But when we're talking about dissolving the district and reforming the district, remember, that's not something that we can just do ourselves. We have to ask the county to put something on the ballot in order for them to form a new parks district. And then we dissolve our own parks district. And with all of the different deadlines for them on proposing this, it works out to about 7 months notice that we need if we're going to go forward with the dissolving and reforming the district. So just to kind of show you what that looks like, if this coming May, if we wanted to put something on, we already missed the window for dissolving and reforming the district. That would have been around November that we would have had to have a decision made. Now, remember, of course, this is when we have to have the decision made. So probably back that up to 2 or 3 months before those, and when we're really talking about it and getting things figured out. For November of 2021, currently there's nothing scheduled for that, but we would need to have a decision by April next month if we wanted to go this coming November. Now, just because there's not something scheduled doesn't mean that you can't put something out there. The problem is that the boards that put something out there have to pay for the entire election themselves. So if we split it up with, say, 20 other things that are on the ballot, it might cost us $1,200. But for us to do a full election, it's around $30,000. And so it's also a tough spot to be, to put something out and be the only ones on the ballot, because you have to convince everybody to vote in a time where they're not voting for anything else. And so that's a tricky spot to be. There's questions on whether or not November or May are the better strategic areas to go. You definitely, if you're going in November of an even year, you're getting a lot more people. We saw Portland this last year in November 2020 pass a big parks bond during the presidential election. Some people don't like November because tax bills have just come out. So people have just gotten their bill and see how much that they're already paying for government services, and then they're voting right afterwards. The May elections are ones that are a little bit more local people voting. I mean, I shouldn't say local people, everyone's local that's voting for it, but it doesn't have nearly as big of a turnout. And tax measures don't do quite as well in May as they've done as they do in November, but The county did just pass their levy this last May. Of course, it failed the May before. They've chosen to go in May for theirs. But it's really it's tough when you're looking 6-7 months out. Just so you know, we've talked before about failing upwards, and if we put something forward, say November 1st, 2022, for this, and we had the decision to do that by this time next year. If this failed, then we would need to make a decision that November 2022 at that very next board meeting, 2 weeks later, if we wanted to go and try it again in May of 2023. And so it's a quick turnaround time if you're going. Otherwise, you're having to skip a year, and if you skip a year, then you're going to this November of 2023 that might not be scheduled. And then you're either looking at this May of 2024 or the following year in 2024. So it's difficult to choose something. You've also got other funding agencies that are going out there as well. You could have the school district or the city going for something, or fire districts. We just don't know until we just choose a date and put something out there. Looking at strategic planning, and I'm just going to wrap up here real quick, and then I'm going to let you guys do the talking. But looking at strategic planning, the decisions are where should we allocate our time and resources in the fiscal year 2021, which of course is July through the following June. How long term should we be thinking? And what I mean by that is, what actions can we take right now that address our needs in 2025, 2020, 2040, or 2040, or 2060? And I'm talking about like long-term park acquisitions, rebuilding the pool, trail connections, partnerships, forming this Parks Foundation that we've talked about a lot of times. Thinking of rails to trails, the corridor. And then, we've talked a lot about recreation and community ed and maybe taking that on. Right now, the school district hasn't been doing recreation and community ed with the pandemic and such. And I don't know about their plans on bringing it back, but I know that there's a significant void there if they don't. We've talked about it before, and we don't have the operation funding to take that on at this point, but how do we get there? And then looking at, specific projects that we already have on the books that we're already planning for, like the Westside Park planning and permitting, the Indian Creek Trail Southside Connector construction, which is in permit right now, and hopefully we will find out in the next 2 or 3 months where we're going with that, and I'd like to start construction this fall on that. And then I'm keeping dog park construction on there, although we haven't heard back from the city. We are still ready to go. We did hear from the port recently that they are interested in this and us continuing with this, and as soon as the city gives us a green light, we would like to be able to move forward with dog park construction. Last year when I looked at it, we did our strategic planning in March. This year we're getting a little bit earlier step with it, with starting in February, but this is definitely something where it could be something that we talk about over 2 meetings. I've given you a lot of information right here, and we could move on and talk about it some more in March, but I'm interested to know what you're thinking about right now with how we set ourselves up for the future, thinking about what we do this year to set ourselves up long term.
I'll start.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we need to get our redistricting plan on the ballot as soon as is reasonably possible. I don't want to pay for a whole election, and so that would be May 17th of 2022. Thoughts? I mean, I just saw so much on that next slide that we can't do anything. Like, we can't do anything about the pool until we fix our funding issues. So we can't just we're stuck.
I would be curious to know if, I mean, Mark, you said that we would have to pay for the election this November if no one else, like we would be on the hook for the whole cost if no one else has any ballot measure. It's kind of a catch-22 because we also don't want to compete with, you know, if the city's going to move forward, which I think the last thing I heard, they're not planning on moving forward with the new police station. But how do we know for sure that there isn't anyone else that is going to have a ballot measure? And then I saw Susan's comment that when, I think it must have been the Protect Our Parks ballot measure was on the election in November 2019, they weren't required to pay for that. It'd be interesting to get some more details on that. So are we positive that we would be on the hook for the full cost if we went for November, redistricting ballot measure this November?
That is what the county told me, and I can look into that on why the Protect Our Parks measure didn't have to be paid for. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that it was a vote of the people in order to put it on the ballot, because they went out and got a petition. My guess is that the city probably foot the bill up for it, or had to foot the bill for it because it was the will of the people, that since it was a initiative campaign. Someone had to pay for it, and I don't know if it was the city or the county, but my guess is that the city had to pay for it.
So
but
Anna,
I can check with the city. Yeah, Deanna.
Anna, you're suggesting that maybe we should go in November if we can.
I definitely, I still lean towards the redistricting option. And but I agree with you. If we could do it sooner than next May and we could do it this November, that would be my preference.
I agree. We should do it as soon as possible.
You know, we have been discussing this redistricting thing for what, 2 years now? And it was probably 3 years ago, we went out and made our plea to the people to rebuild our pool. The pool's going to fall apart before we finally get this done. And I think that we should get on that redistricting thing and see how we come out on it as soon as we can.
I agree, Glenna. I don't care who else is on the ballot. It's our turn.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yep, me too.
If we had to, if we did have to pay for it and we were the only ones going in November, do you think strategically that's the best way to go?
No.
What did you say it would cost, Mark?
$30,000.
$30,000?
You have to pay the mail for everybody or the printing and mailing out a ballot. And that's just an estimate. They weren't quite sure because it depends on how big it is, how many pieces are in it. I mean, when you think about it, splitting it though, if there's one other thing, then it's probably half that. It's probably $15,000. When we elect board members, we have to pay. They send me a bill for our section of it. Of course, we're splitting that with, water, soil conservation and transportation districts and port districts and everybody else. So it's usually about $2,000, maybe $1,200 when we elect board members. But it is just split amongst all the different agencies that have something on the ballot.
Would it be cheaper to ask Ruben to check check the Secretary of State website, make sure we have to pay for this?
Yeah, we can check with Ruben and I can figure out why the Protect Our Parks measure didn't pay for it, but somebody paid for it, and I don't know who that would have been.
Yeah, that was a good comment from Susan Crowley, and we'll have to look into that. I suspect because of the county's finances, they're going to do everything they can to not have to pay for this. They're pretty tight situation too. I pretty much agree with what Glenna said, that we need to move ahead. I think we ought to spend a little time though trying to determine, like from some expert, I don't know who it is, and hopefully they're cheap, but how this works if you're the only one on the ballot, and what that gains you or what you lose by doing that, and if you're the only one on the ballot, you certainly have the potential to direct the total conversation, and it's not going to be diluted out by anybody else. So that's a real plus. The one thing that strikes me about this, though, looking at when Mark put up the whole strategic plan or our whole master plan, is that we don't have the swimming pool and the aquatic center really in big enough letters compared to everything else. And not on this one, but going way back, Mark, yeah, I mean, but if you look at the master plan too, there's 57 different items there, and the aquatic center's one tiny little line. And I think we all know that somehow or another, we've got to make sure that in our own minds and everybody's minds, that's the priority for now. Because I agree with Glenna that we're going to find ourselves in a real situation here in a year or two if we can't move ahead. So I'm for moving ahead unless we can see some indicators that it's a really bad decision based on what happens if you're the only one on the ballot in an off year. And I don't know how we find that out, but.
Yeah, you definitely want to be strategic about it. And your first move out of the gate is usually pretty telling, and you can see where you're at from it. So if you go during a bad time and it's your very first shot at it, you usually aren't upping it to go for more money the next time. You're going backwards the time after that. So I think that those are great points, Mike.
I'd imagine, Mark, there's also an opportunity where we can say we want to put ourselves on the ballot, but then there's a point at which they tell us how many other things are on the ballot, and then we can make a decision then and pull out at the last minute if it's going to cost us $30,000. I don't think the right thing to do is to spend $30,000 to put ourselves on the ballot, but who knows what else might go on that we split with a bunch of ways or something. So I assume there's a process and a point at which we can take it off.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, there is a point. We can. There's a date somewhere around August or so that things are needing to get actually put on the ballot. There are some things that we would have to do with the county voting to dissolve our district and all of these different things ahead of time. So we would be putting a lot of work into it before we found that out and found out how many other people are going for it. But I will.
Would it be work that would be done regardless, and then that work is done in time for the next time?
No.
You know? Oh, you have to redo it again.
You would, yeah. Because what the county needs to do, well in advance is they need to advertise that this coming election year they will be dissolving the Parks District. Now, within 60 days of this thing. It's all stuff that has to do with the state attorney general's office on timing for these different things. And so once you start that ball rolling, and that's why the last time when we pulled it in April of last year for the November 2020 ballot, and it was supposed to go on May 2nd or 3rd at the next county meeting. We were supposed to get on their agenda for them to announce that they were looking to dissolve, because they announced that they're dissolving our district, and then we announced, I think somewhere around July, that we're reforming a new district and what it is and all of this different stuff. So you can kind of unring that bell, but you can't use that work and then move it forward again. We'd have to do it all again.
Okay.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing from the group is to do some more research on who pays for the ballot, and maybe talk to the city and county and other agencies and see if anyone else has anything that they think might be going on the November ballot, just so we can see if we have anything else to help split the cost. And then maybe I will see if I can get a hold of some sort of a political consultant and see what I can figure out to answer Mike's question of strategy behind being the only one on a ballot measure, or being one of 2 or 3 on a small ballot measure, versus going on a more crowded time when there's a lot more people voting. Because I think that we do need to think about strategy on that.
Could you also find out, like, if we are a go for November, what steps we need to go? Like, Glenna, you brought up a good point about, we talked to folks about, funding for the rebuilding the pool 2.5, 3 years ago now. So we kind of need to up our outreach again. And part of the reason why rebuilding the pool is the same size as these other things is because the feedback we got back then was, you know, our constituency that uses the pool aren't the only voters. Like, we need to reach out to people who also want the parks and the trails and these other things done. So we really need to have it might be like a working session or something once we know when we're actually moving forward of what we as a board can do to help generate positive support for this ballot measure.
And you know, this might be a perfect time to focus on the pool. There are a lot of people who want us to open that pool again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that hopefully they would be favorable for it and help us out with this election.
Yeah, I agree. I think not just the pool, but recreation, outdoors activities are really the safe things that people can do right now. And I could imagine us having a good message at this point. And also, I'm not so sure that it's a bad thing for us to get an election that doesn't have the majority, that's not a big election. You know, I mean, if we do a good enough job of getting the word out, it could actually work in our favor to have people who are interested in passing the park be the only ones voting. You know, I'm serious.
No, I can totally see that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, sounds like you have some direction there.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you want from us?
So we had talked a little bit at the last meeting about how the board felt about borrowing money against the SDC funds in order to be able to purchase acquisition or land or trail easements or different things like that. Even Westside Park, if we move forward with that process, we could always borrow money against the SDC revenue. I wanted to get a little bit more feedback from the board on how they feel about being able to do that and about being able to have the ability, if the right purchase or the right piece of property came up, to be able to jump on that piece of property or that trail easement, rather than waiting to save up enough money, and the land might not be around in that time in the future.
So I have a question, Mark, about the rates of that, because I'm on another board and it's actually making sense for us to get a gigantic loan because the rates are so low and they're lower than what would be normal, cost of living rates. Even like they're at 1%, and we know everything else is going to go up at least 3%. And so it makes sense to have the money at such a low rate, because the money alone will make money for us. And I'm just curious if it's something similar in this case.
I am going to promote Monica. She is in the audience, and we're going to move her up because she knows a lot more about the interest rates. I will tell you that I do know that interest rates are very low right now, and I've had conversations with the city as well, who can loan us money as well for park acquisitions and such. They said the money is not a problem for them. The problem is having a funding source to pay back the money. And so they have funds like a fully funded equipment replacement fund that they legally are allowed to borrow from in order to do that. Now they do need to charge us an interest rate on it, but it's a market rate and kind of a lower rate. There's Monica. Monica, did you want to talk? Did you hear the question?
I did hear the question, and interest rates are very, very low right now, and that is worth exploring and having conversation, especially if you're local banks.
So I think that's a great point, Suzanne. So if we don't normally have this kind of opportunity to have such a low interest rate and be able to purchase something with the incoming money that's coming in from SDCs. Right now, We have between 130 and 150,000 that comes in per year on that inside the urban growth boundary SDC, and that's will be going up because we are going to be raising the rates again this year.
But I guess, you know, besides having the money to use to spend, if borrowing the money makes money for us because it's enough money, because the interest rates are so low, then that alone would also make sense to me. If that,
Is it, I mean, I understand the strategy idea behind that, but is it fiscally responsible to borrow money? I don't know, like, not to go back to sitting on an asset that, you know, to bear it, but as opposed to selling something that we know we can't develop. Like, I don't know, that's gnawing on me.
So if you borrow some money to purchase an asset and the interest rate is so low that the money, if you didn't invest that money and you had the money sitting in the pool account, let's say, being invested, and we're not even earning as much. And that's a great question. It's a little bit hard to explain, and we can put it together, but the interest rate is right now very, very low. If you have an asset that you don't know what to do with, which you have land right now you don't know what to do with, it's not going to decrease in value, right? It's only going to increase in value. And if the increase percent is greater than your interest rate from your borrowing, there's some analysis to look at there.
So Anna, I think that you were alluding again to the Barrett property and us sitting on the Barrett property. The one thing to consider, to remember, is that because we have half of the value of that property is state park grant money. If we were to sell it, then the clock starts ticking. We have 2 years to buy another property of equal or greater recreation utility. And so until we have a decision on, say, the Blackman Skakel property, on if we're going to go for it, meaning that we have a permit that says that it's okay to spend that, we would be setting ourselves up to make the decision to sell it early or to go ahead and put it on the market or sell it before that is there. We'd be setting ourselves up to lose a lot of money, which would be paying back half of that amount. So unless we had another property.
Mark, I want to wait until we are a little bit more sure of the Skakel and Blackman property. I agree that we should sell the property that we have, but 2 years isn't very long, and I'm not sure that it's long enough to do all the planning that we need to do.
Well, that's not really, I mean, that's not really my question. I guess, you know, I guess I need a little more clarification of why we're borrowing money, or if it is just for strategic purposes, or like, exactly, like, do you feel like we need to look into borrowing money now just because the opportunity is good because the interest rates are so low and everyone's anticipating that they are going to go up again? Or I guess why are we discussing borrowing money, I guess is the question.
I think my answer to that, Anna, is that we need to be ready if the right property comes along, or we start seeking out property. We just got our marching orders from the master plan saying where we need to invest in parks and that we need to start looking around at these places. And so I think that we should be strategically looking, if we have the money right now to tie up some of this land, we need to start doing a land grab and land banking right now. That's my opinion. I don't know if it's the opinion of the board, but I think that we need to just start getting all of these trail connections that we need and getting the land that we need, start getting that all tied up right now, before it's too late, before that land is no longer available. I think that it also sets us up, if we are going for a ballot measure in the future and we've purchased a couple of these land things, it gives us something to talk about for things that we would like to create. So we basically say, we've purchased, 5 acres here and 5 acres over there, and we would love to turn it into a park, but we can't do that until we have the operation dollars in order to do that, and we have the capital building dollars to build this property. And I think that it makes a stronger case that our park system is kind of stagnant and set in time until we can until we get the operation dollars to move forward. But if we've looked in advance and we've anticipated our needs and purchased the property, I think that's being good stewards of public land. I mean, you look at the school district and their property off of May Street. They purchased that in 2006 or 2007. And they don't plan on building a pool there. Building a school there until 2036, I believe, which is the next time that they'll be able to do a bond in order to build a school. So, that was 30 years in the future before they even break ground on that property.
And I mean, it's not just your opinion; it's what the master plan says. That we've invested a lot of time and money and energy in. It says that we need to do these things. Just as a reminder, not that I have anything specific in mind, but yeah. A lot of the ones that are on there are smaller, more, smaller parks, neighborhood parks and so on. And so I think that's maybe what Mark is thinking of. If something like that comes up, if there's an opportunity, are we willing to borrow money against future SDCs, right?
Yeah, even the Campbell property is within reach. We could purchase for what that was for sale for. There is a star on that one on our map on the master plan in that area, and we could purchase that property and make the trail go through and have kind of a nature park area with some wetlands and such. I mean, we could make these investments right now.
Okay. So what do you guys think about that? Borrowing money for land acquisition?
I personally think it's an important piece in us doing what we said we're going to be doing. I think we're pretty stagnant right now with our limited staffing and limited funding, and I think it's an important piece that we need to do.
And just a reminder, we're just talking about theoretical land acquisition. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about anything specific. And of course, we do not talk about real property transactions during the regular meeting anyway.
I also think that perhaps, though, if we were to do it, we maybe wanted to make as a board a plan for what the intention, at least, of the borrowed money would be. Like, do we want to specifically say it's for future land acquisitions? Do we want to specifically say it's for a dog park or whatever,
I was talking more in generalities about the policy decision on whether or not the board believes that it's a good policy to borrow money against the revenue in order to make land acquisitions if we need to. I wasn't talking any specifics.
I
think as a policy, generally, it's not a good idea to borrow money unless you know what you're borrowing it for specifically. So I think it's kind of a premature discussion, but then when you throw in the low interest rates, I think it's, I don't know what to think.
I guess I agree. I wouldn't call it a policy around borrowing money, but I do think that it's a strategic, at this point, it would be a strategic decision, and I think a good one. But a policy about borrowing money makes me nervous because I agree with Anna that you shouldn't generally borrow money. Just borrow money.
Wrong terminology, but I guess I'm taking the temperature of the board on how you feel about that, and if that's something when we're talking about what we should be working for in the next fiscal year. Should I be looking at land acquisitions? Should I be looking at things above what we normally have in our SDC account in order to secure these lands? Do we want to be securing lands for well in the future on properties that we probably won't be developing for 10, 20 years?
I mean, if something comes up, I want to know about it and I want us to talk about it. Yeah. And I would not rule out borrowing money. Is that kind of what you mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think from a strategic planning point, though, I prefer our focus be on, the longer term sustainable funding that could be done either through, ideally first through the reformation of our district, and then alternatively on a bond or levy measure, a bond measure. I think that should be more of a focus.
I think that's really our goal. If you want goal setting, that's one that I really want us to stay focused on. The redistricting.
Okay.
I agree with that.
I guess I have a clarifying point though. The redistricting will give us operation dollars, but in terms of big dollars to be able to do land acquisition, we need larger sums of money. And I'm not sure that I totally agree with a levy or bond versus borrowing money, because if we could borrow against SDCs and repay a loan with SDCs, then we're not burdening our taxpayers more. So I see it as a viable option that doesn't necessarily require us to burden the taxpayers.
Mark,
Mm-hmm.
I think that you probably need to have a discussion with bond counsel on how that would work if you, with the plan to move forward to redistrict. That probably will throw some wrinkles in any debt opportunities. So I think that's obviously more analysis has to happen, but I think that's a big question as well. I don't know how that would work, if it would be come due immediately upon resolution of a district. I don't know, but you probably want to talk about some bond counsel, maybe Ruben.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We did have that conversation with Ruben before over what sort of assets and contracts and obligations roll over into the next Parks District. And there is a procedure for that, but I think that debt is definitely something that needs to be explored on how that goes over, especially if the district is dissolved and there's a new district. That might also be a little different if it's a bond versus a loan from the city that's being paid back over something else. So, but something we would need to address.
And currently we don't have any debt, correct? We're not under any bond payments.
Correct.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's another reason why reformation is ideal at this point. Sorry, Mike, did you have something you wanted to ask?
I just sent some contact information for Mark.
Oh, great. Thank you.